Hey, ladies, welcome to the podcast, Dear Christian Women. This is your host here, Colette. I am so excited to have an amazing woman of God on the podcast today. She is sharing about the topic on trauma, and I just cannot wait to get into it with this amazing woman of God. She is a trauma-informed therapist, resident in counseling. She is a mental health therapist and a certified personal trainer. She has a passion for empowering and helping her clients, everybody that she mentors and clients in her counseling. And she specializes specifically with eating disorders. She specializes with athletes, body images, EMDR, and holistic healing. Please welcome you guys to this podcast, Taegan Field.
Hello. Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
I'm so excited to have you on the podcast. Thank you so much, Taegan, for coming on and just sharing your testimony, sharing a very, very difficult type of topic, um, and just being just bold and courageous in the Lord. I'm so excited to have you.
Yeah, thank you. I'm excited.
I'm so excited too. So, as I mentioned a few seconds ago, we are sharing on the topic of trauma. And I know that a lot of women, I'm sure, can really resonate with this topic and everything that you're about to share on in your testimony. Trauma is something that everybody, men and women, every single person has been through. And so I think it is just such a important topic to talk about, to share about, and how Jesus really gets us through that. So, before we get into the specific topic, Taegan, can you just tell the listeners a little bit about yourself and about your upbringing?
Yeah, for sure. So, as you mentioned before, I am a mental health therapist right now. Um, I actually just graduated from school not too long ago in May, so not even a year. And so I'm working as a therapist now, but I was a nurse. I worked on the mother baby unit and like sometime on the ICU for like 4 years before that. And yeah, that's what brought me here now. But I grew up with a identical twin sister and two younger siblings. Our parents were married for 18 years until the week I moved to college. Then kind of separated, got divorced. But I grew up in a I want to say Christian home because we learned the Bible, went to church. Church was a huge part of our lives. Very small, like conservative church, but it was, um, yeah, every Sunday, church, youth group, all of that. I also was super big athlete growing up, like super into running. That was like a huge part of my identity and my story. That and then college and here. That's just like a brief overview without all the details in there. But
Yeah, no, thank you. You, so you would say that you early on knew Jesus, right? You kind of grew up in the faith.
yes.
Because I always love to ask women, so you knew Jesus early on, you grew up in the faith, but would you say there was a um kind of pivotal moment in your walk where you really experienced Jesus and you really felt the presence of the Holy Spirit and realized like on your own, like, yes, I want you, Jesus, in my life, and yes, I want a relationship with you. Was there a moment um in your early walk, or at what point was that at where you really first came to like deeply know Jesus in a personal way?
Yeah. So as I said before, I grew up in a Christian home. So my family was I think my mom even was in charge of VBS, like Vacation Bible School at my church from like when I was born. So I grew up hearing the story of the gospel, everything like that. Even just recently visited my church that I grew up with, and like one of the women were like, "Oh, I taught you in preschool." So I've always heard the gospel, knew about Jesus, but I remember in 7 years old, I can even picture the night as I'm talking about it. I went to Awana, which was like this little like church thing for kids. And I remember that was the night that I decided like I am giving my life to Jesus. And so from there, it's been a lot of a story more of like growth and I guess sanctification, growing closer to the Lord throughout the rest of my life. So I'm so thankful that I was like my parents gave me the opportunity to know the gospel and everything from such a young age because I don't know how I would have made it through the rest of my life without that. So yeah.
Wow. Yeah, that's so true. So you were really young, and that's really cool that you, at such a young age, like already gave your life to Jesus and was so serious in your walk. I think that's incredible. And as we start to discuss the trauma aspect of your life and the things you've been through, which I will definitely want you to dive into next. It's really amazing that considering everything that you've been through, that you never, like, lost faith. Because you hear people that either maybe they never really started walking with God, but, like, sometimes you do hear people that walk away from the faith
Hmm.
when they go through some very, very trying times in their life and in their relationship. They walk away or they throw in the towel or they reject God, because maybe they identify that trauma as, like, his fault. So I think that it's really amazing that you are still walking so closely with the Lord today and how you can share that. So it's incredible, and God is so good. So do you want to tell the listeners a bit? So I guess what I would ask next is, can you share specifically about some of the traumatic things that you've been through, like how it started, the process, and then finding Jesus through that?
Yeah, for sure. So it's kind of funny because when I think about like the trauma that I've been through, if you think about like the main, I guess the official definition of trauma, it's something like witnessing uh, a life-threatening situation or experiencing a life-threatening situation yourself, and then or like sexual assault or something like that. So, and another common thing with people who have been through trauma is not thinking that their trauma is kind of like, I guess, important or big enough to count. So I didn't realize I even had like traumatic things that I went through until like kind of the past couple years, really. But so that all that to say is I all of my siblings and my father all had a pretty serious mental health struggles growing up. My the first traumatic thing that I think I went through was my twin sister. She almost died from an eating disorder, like, multiple times. The first time starting when we were in 5th grade. So we were about, I don't know, 10? And I remember her being in the ICU for multiple weeks. Like, I think it was a month in the ICU, almost dying from that. So that was kind of like the first thing I remember. And then now I think thinking back on my life also, like my father struggled with alcohol use throughout our life. So there was just like a lot of conflict, yelling, fighting throughout like growing up. Um that some There's some trauma around there. And then each of my siblings almost like they tried to commit suicide at one point in their life, so almost died from suicide, and then my father did as well. So that that was kind of like how it started. My sister then, after healing from the eating disorder in 5th grade, she went on, got a little bit better, but then 16, when we were 16, junior in high school again, she had to go back to the hospital for a month or 2, ICU again, and then went to North Carolina. We grew up in New Jersey, then she went to North Carolina to get treatment and was there for about, like, I wanna say 8 months, a pretty significant amount of time. So, yeah, that was kind of like the trauma growing up. And then, um, I went to college, my parents got divorced. I had a lot of things go on, like, hard things go on with my family at that time too. My dad's, like, alcohol use disorder got pretty bad during college, and then, that was the time where he almost died by suicide. He's better now, but then, yeah, my 2 little brothers did too at that time as well, and then, yeah. So that was, like, the family kind of side of it, but then I have other things that I experienced as well. I don't know.
My goodness. Wow. And how old were you? I know you said your twin sister was in 5th grade, so you would have been her age. Um, but you said you were in college when it happened with your dad. Was that also with, like, your brothers too, when you were in college, so you were a little bit older?
Yes. And my youngest brother, the first time that he was hospitalized for mental health, almost dying by suicide, was when he was like, I want to say 14, like 12. Like he was so young, so young. It was really sad. And then, yes, I had another thought, but I don't remember.
No, that's okay. I can't even imagine how that has, affected you, especially being young and dealing with everything that was going through with your sister and then your dad and your brothers. And, do you ever remember if there was a point that when all of this was going on, was there ever a point, if you can remember, where you just felt like, for lack of a better word, um, where you felt like it really took a severe toll on you?
Mm. Yeah, I think the hardest year that I remember, besides when my sister was in the hospital, I don't think I realized how much that affected me until, like, looking back on it, both times, but then the time I really remember struggling was my freshman year of college. Like I said before, my parents got divorced, like, the week they didn't get divorced, they separated the week that they dropped me off at college, so, like, brought me to college, dropped me off, they went home, moved out of the childhood home that I grew up in for 18 years. And then, so they moved. I remember being so lonely at college, like that first year when everyone's like meeting new people, and it was hard for me to find like my like close friends in college for the first year. So it was hard because I felt like lonely. I was homesick, but for a home that I didn't have anymore, because what was my home? Like my family wasn't in my mind, like it was not my family anymore. I was broken. I was like lost a lot of trust in things that I had been putting, like, trust in for so long, like, security in, and then my health at that point was really not great either. I had, brain surgery actually right before I went to college, and that was a whole different story and kind of traumatic as well. But then I was so sick in college. I couldn't like I had some other issue and I lost all the strength in my muscles. And so I couldn't lift my arms and I felt like I was dying. Like it felt like my body was breaking down. So at that point, no family, well, I had a family, but I felt like I was like, I don't even know what's happening. And then I felt so lonely, so homesick, and I had basically my body was breaking down. So, oh, yeah. That was when I was like, I literally have nothing but Jesus. So,
Wow. Was that, that's what was actually gonna kinda bring me into that next question is was that kind of the point in college when all of this is going on? Um, was that the point where you were clinging to Jesus? Was there a main time through all of this where you started to see, like, God, like, I see you working through this and, as you're clinging to him and you're going through one like, severely traumatic thing after the other, um, was there a point where you just were like, "God," like, did you see what am I trying to ask? I'm sorry. Um, so I guess what I'm trying to ask is, during all of this severely traumatic time in your life, which is incredible, you started to, like, cling to Jesus and realize, like, "God, that you're all I have." Um, was it at that point or maybe a little bit later where you could say you saw, like, Jesus working through all of that, like, in you and in your life and
hmm. That's a pretty good question because I think there's two parts to that. So I felt like at that point, I think was the first time I really started struggling really difficult, like I had anxiety and things throughout, like, growing up, and now looking back, I'm like, well, I struggled also with, like, an eating disorder before this time, but that was the time when I really struggled a lot with my mental health, like, I all of that combined kind of spiraled me into, like, an eating disorder as well. Like, my sister growing up eating disorder, but then I then developed the eating disorder. I think partially from the trauma leading to that, but then also, other factors. And then where was I going with this? Oh, how did I see Jesus leading working in this? So, yeah, I tried other things to help manage all of this craziness, which a lot of times that's how eating disorders develop as, like, a coping mechanism for feeling out of control or things in your life happening. And it just brought me further and further away from hope and sickness, like, further into sickness, and so I saw Jesus working basically by, first of all, keeping me alive because I got really sick at one point. Second, like, I think look back now and, like, how did I make it through that year? I don't know. But, um yeah, I think I'm so thankful that I went to Liberty because I was surrounded by a lot of Christians and believers, um, and it was really sweet and cool to see a lot of other people, worshiping the Lord and just openly talking about faith and everything. I went to a really public school in high school where it was, like, weird to be a Christian, so it was, like, super refreshing, and I think God definitely worked in that way and, like, putting me in that environment because I don't know where I would have been. Like, I remember at that time being like, "I don't wanna go to sleep because that means I have to do tomorrow," and I was so tired and felt so I don't like, I was running out of hope, but yeah. I think that's a long way to answer your question of, like, that's the time that I felt like I had to lean on Jesus the most during the trauma, and I definitely now see the ways that he's really worked that. But
Yeah, especially since you were describing which I think is really, really common too, when you were going through a lot of that stuff and trauma and you were looking for other ways to try to cope and deal with everything. You brought up that you were like struggling with an eating disorder, and there's so many different ways that we can try to cope with trauma and try to manage it or deal with it, um, where it just becomes this stronghold in our life and everything like that when it's when we're not when we're trying other means other than Jesus. And I can very well as well relate to that with the trauma that I've had in my life and like alcoholism.
mhm,
Um and so I just think it's but I do think it's really encouraging, I'm sure too, especially for people listening that like, you were going through a lot, you were going through a lot of severe trauma, you were trying to find ways to cope, and that all the while
mhm,
Jesus was strengthening you in him and bringing people around you and in situations that you really needed, like other believers and people that could pour into you or just be moral support or, you know, remind you of who you really are in Jesus. And so I think that's really cool that I think it's amazing that God worked in that way in your life and that he's so
yeah,
faithful.
yeah,
um
and
and so when when you so at this point when you were seeing God working in your life, like you said, at when you were at Liberty University, was there like a specific moment in this time, right, that you're going through trauma and you're dealing with everything and you're yet you're surrounded by other believers. Was there a specific moment, turning point where you started to like realize like, oh my gosh, God is working, and everything that's going on in my life that's awful, like I'm gonna let go of, like I'm gonna put it the foot of the cross. Like in other words, like the things prior you were trying to cope with to deal
mm,
with the trauma. But then you said that people were pouring into you and that God was working in that time in your life. So was there a turning point in your life that you were like, oh my gosh, like I know that I'm doing this and I need to like put it at the foot of the cross?
mhm. Yeah, definitely. Um So during that first year, I don't know what what caused me to decide to try therapy for the first time. And I know the Lord is the only one that can heal us, but I really believe that He used this therapist that I went to help save my life. Cause I was like, okay, so growing up, a part backstory is it was kind of, like, not talked about that my sister had an eating disorder, so I felt a lot of shame around that, like, it was instead of saying that she had an eating disorder, we said, "Oh, like, she has medical problems," like, when people would ask why, she's not in school, I would just say, "Oh, she has medical problems," and stuff like that, so I felt like in college, when I started struggling with the eating disorder, I felt so much shame and embarrassment, and I was like, "This is bad." Like, I shouldn't, like, be struggling with this. I was always the one that was okay and didn't have problems with food, and now I'm doing this. So it took a lot for me. I was in like a lot of denial, but for some reason I was like, I can't keep doing this. So I went to therapy at Liberty, and the therapist that I saw, I think I definitely used her to save my life because she was like the one that was like, girl, you have trauma, first of all, and second of all, you have an eating disorder. And so, yeah, I was that was hard to hear, but also, like, so validating and so relieving. Cause she didn't run away from me when she heard my story, all the details and everything. She didn't, like, shame me for having struggles with food, and so
So, um, that's interesting that you say that. And I myself have never, thank God, struggled with an eating disorder, but I cannot imagine having that be something that like just that you struggle with so much because it's like it's not like with alcohol or drugs where you can quite literally live without it. Like you have to like eat in order to like physically live. And I don't under like I can't imagine the mental toll it will take or just the spiritual toll it will take trying to navigate coping with an eating disorder. And I also want to say too, it breaks my heart because I don't think that women should ever or anybody, men for this matter too, anybody that like struggles with an eating disorder should ever feel shame
Mhm.
for going through that. But I do think it's just I am so glad that you did have somebody that was in your life at that point that could help you um and direct you in maybe ways that you didn't have before.
yeah, I'm so thankful for it. And I think that that experience led me, plus combined with witnessing like all my siblings almost die from their mental health issues with like by suicide, that and my work as a nurse, which I haven't talked about that side of the trauma yet, but helped me like I felt the Lord calling me to become a therapist because of those experiences. So now looking back, I'm like, wow, that's pretty cool because he definitely used it there now. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, would you can you share a little bit about that as well? Like when you were a nurse, I know that you had um shared before about some stuff that you had experienced traumatic things. Do you mind sharing a little bit about that?
Yeah, for sure. And I'm like happy to talk about this because I think a lot of nursing is really, really hard to go through and witness, but it doesn't get talked about a lot because it's just like a job is you're just doing it every day. But I worked for 6 months. Well, first, okay, I started in nursing school. I worked in the ER during COVID, so 2020. So we saw a lot of crazy things there. Really scary. That was kind of like the first time I've seen people die, people code, people get CPR done on them. But during that time, all like adrenaline and everything kicked in. I was like, this is new. It didn't start affecting me really until later on. And then in nursing school, there was like a huge push like, oh, you're not a real nurse unless you do something, the ICU or the ER. And God's always like, I think I've always had a sensitive heart, which I know that can be good, I think, but when I decided to go into the ICU after like, first just graduating, I don't think I realized how, like, much I would be affected by witnessing people, like, die a lot, like, almost every shift that we worked. So, that was super hard to see, and go through, like, I don't know, I got diagnosed with PTSD actually after, like a year or 2, I guess, after starting to work because of how much, like, it was affecting me, like, just, like, the things that we did as a nurse. I only lasted 6 months in the ICU before I changed to the mother baby unit because it was just too much stress for me to handle, which that in itself is, like, that's a whole 'nother story, but I felt, like, so much shame by that, like, "Oh, I can't handle this." When really, like, what like, going even back to the definition of trauma before, like, witnessing someone, like, nearly lose their life or lose their life, like, I was seeing that every single day. So that was my experience in the ICU, but then moving on to mother baby unit in the hospital, that's like the happiest unit on the hospital. I was there for 3.5, 4 years. I love that job. I felt like it was really special, fun to pour into women, like see like some of the best days of their lives holding their baby and teach them about that. But at the same time, the sadness was like, and the trauma in that unit was like a different type of sadness than the ICU. Like they're both hard, but this one in its own way, like so, like the sad was so sad. Like caring for baby moms that were like holding their babies that had just like passed away, um, or like stillborn or had died right after birth and stuff like that was really hard. Or like we had some inmates where we'd have to separate the baby from the mom, really sad stuff like that. So that stuff affected me a lot too. But
That is um that is like that's understandable that you have trauma. That is a lot to carry. First of all, I have so much respect for anybody in the medical field, nurses. I have a sister who's a nurse, and I don't know how you guys do it day in and day out with all the levels of, especially you said you worked in the ER, like all the levels of awful things that you guys probably see and witness, and that's just you like I imagine you like you carry that with you spiritually, like you carry that, like you take it home, it's on you, and then experiencing the trauma of working with babies and seeing babies like die, and I can't I don't even want to know that level of trauma. um and so I mean you have just had so many experiences, which I don't think I've ever met someone that had so many extremely traumatic things happen in their life, like struggling with an eating disorder, um, working in the ED, and seeing all the stuff that you saw, experiencing the loss of babies with you know, their mothers just delivering, all the stuff that you went through with your family. That is, first of all, totally understandable why you would have something like an eating disorder. It's totally understandable, especially like when we're going through trauma in our life, and maybe if we're in seasons where we don't really know how to go to God with it, we quite literally do find like anything we can just to stop that feeling of suffering, to like numb the pain, to not be every second carrying that severe trauma that we try to cover through substances and things like that. And I just can't imagine, you know, in what you're doing today, how you're helping people and how you're sharing your faith, I think is like right there. That's a testimony. That's a miracle, because I think I said this a little bit earlier in our episode, but that like a lot of people, um, they they get to such a place of trauma. They um either they walk away from their faith, or they walk away from the Lord, or they blame the Lord, or they do things like they commit suicide and they end their life. And the spiritual and emotional impact that trauma has on our lives, that we were never meant to carry, by the way, that Jesus already took on the cross for us. I can't even imagine, Taken, like, but God is so good, and just seeing how he's working in your life and through your testimony. You have a very, very powerful testimony. And far too many people, quite literally every human being, has been through trauma. And I think that it's incredible how you are alive today, and you're sharing your testimony, and you're sharing Jesus, that you are like like you're a walking miracle. You're a walking, talking testimony of God's goodness in your life, of Jesus's faithfulness in your life, and how much he loves you, and how he is working everything in your life so that you can be a testimony to others. I think it's not a coincidence. It's a God.
Yeah.
Sorry, I just wanted to share that because, girl, you've been through it. Like, it's just crazy. So at this point, when you were at Liberty and you started going to therapy, and you said that you had somebody that was just kind of speaking in your life and helping you identify all of this, um, at what point did you start really walking out like who you are today in Jesus? I guess a better way for me to Sorry, just I guess a better way for me to word this question is, how did you start walking out the truth of Jesus's word in your life, and starting to walk in victory and walk in um, the light of Jesus versus the trauma?
Mm. Okay, that's a good question. I think that it's a process, was a process, and still is a process of healing. It takes a long time, I think, to heal from eating disorder and trauma. I struggled for a while with disordered eating, and the eating disorder side of things that a lot of times can take a long time to heal from. Especially like you were saying, like we have to eat all the time, so it gets hard to get through that. But then so I don't know like a distinct like specific point that I started like fully being healed, but I definitely saw growth throughout my whole time in undergrad and college, and then as I started working as a nurse for sure, um, leaning on the Lord. I think in college is when my faith grew, like, the most it has, especially so a part of the story that I didn't, kind of talk about yet is that as I mentioned, I grew up in a Christian home. Parents would tell me the gospel all the time. We'd read Bible stories before I went to bed as a kid, we'd pray, every night, but then my part of, like, once my parents got divorced, all of that, my dad kind of walked away from the faith and said, like, "Well, I've never actually believed any of that." So that was kind of really hard for me to hear. I guess that kind of in its own way is trauma because, like, we're talking about souls here. So that was really scary and confusing to me at that time. But it's interesting because that also, like, I remember just like begging the Lord to save my father and like begging my dad, being like, "No, dad, we forgive you. Like, it's okay. It doesn't matter that, like, you've done all that stuff. Like, we love you. Like, it's okay. You're forgiven." So I feel like this somehow related to your question, and now I don't really know how it connected. That I feel so blessed and, like, thankful that I moved towards the Lord instead of away from him doing all that stuff that time. So now that I've been doing my own healing, I have the opportunity to, I guess, do what the Lord's called me to do more than I did when I was like really deep in the struggling.
Yeah. I think that's great. I think that's amazing. And I actually really, really think it's really important what you just said, because sometimes we're continuing to be in the process of healing. It doesn't always look like a quick fix. Sometimes it's a long process. Sometimes it's we're continuing to walk in the process of healing as God is continuing to grow us. And I think the most important thing is, like, Jesus walks through it with us. And I also just want to kind of shed light on what you said too, because I sometimes think Christians think that if they're not automatically healed, especially from something as serious as a eating disorder and something as serious as like traumatic events that can be a very long process to be a continual walk of healing and freedom. I think sometimes people get fearful that if they're not instantly healed, that either means they're lacking faith or that God's not faithful.
Mhm.
And that couldn't be further than from the truth because I think that some things w- are immediately delivered and there's other things we might still walk through while we're here on earth, but God walks us through it. And if it's not something that we're instantly healed from, we can know that God is doing something greater in our hardest seasons and things we're going through, and that he uses all things for our good. And it doesn't mean that we lack faith just because maybe we don't see right now the final result that we one day will see because God's faithful.
Mhm.
And sorry, I don't really know where I was going with that, but I just really
No.
like what you
Yeah, they're good.
appreciate what you said.
God is faithful. So, and I think that was really, really important to understand is that you're not just immediately going to be healed. Like, I mean, I told you, like, I first accepted Jesus in when I was 7. So, yeah, it's kind of like a lifelong process. So,
Yeah. And there's some things I think we're gonna still have our whole life as Christians because this world was never meant to be easy. This world was never meant to be carefree. Like we find Jesus and then life's great with butterflies and sunshine and we never have a single struggle. In fact, it's the opposite. As we believe, as we put our faith in Jesus, life can actually a lot of times become even harder because now we are set free, but we're now dealing with all kinds of spiritual warfare we didn't know before. And sometimes it can become even harder um, after becoming a Christian. And Jesus tells us that in John. He says that we're going to have trials and tribulations in this world, but that he's overcome the world. And so I didn't mean to kind of go off topic. I just, when you said that, I thought it was encouraging because I hope that if there are women right now that are going to be listening to this podcast and hear your episode, that they don't feel alone if they're still in that process of, oh my gosh, like maybe I'm still struggling right now with like an eating disorder. Maybe I'm still struggling with healing from this particular traumatic event that they will be moved by your testimony because um, it doesn't mean that we don't have faith and it doesn't mean that we don't trust the Lord just because something isn't instantly um, removed.
yeah. No, I think that's so encouraging. I think especially with eating disorders and trauma, both of those things are super rude. Like shame is a huge part of it. Like I'm bad. Like I can't believe I'm still struggling with this. So if we speak more about how like healing can be a process and take a long time, and just because you're saved and a Christian doesn't automatically mean that you're going to be healed right away, can take away some of that shame because it's not saying something is you're messed up. It's just saying that you are in the process of healing and yeah, that's okay.
I love that you say that. It's so true. And it's also just like, um, you know, sometimes I don't know why everything in life happens, right? Because I'm not God and his ways are higher. But sometimes I do think that in the seasons where we're struggling and the seasons where we're trying to continually um like have things happen, like that's right the area where we can just continue to cling to Jesus and to grow deeper in our relationship with him. Um and I'm not saying every woman's like this. I'm talking specifically about myself that if there was nothing in life right now that I struggled with, I I would wonder how much I would really rely on the Lord. You know, I need to be in a position where I'm always coming back to Jesus and relying on him because he is the source of life. Um and he's, John 6:35 tells us that he is the bread of life. Um and so I don't know if a lot of women feel that way. I know that I have, and um I just I think I'm reminded even more of God's goodness in my suffering. if something isn't immediately given to me or taken from me, right? Something given to me that I want or something taken away that I don't want. I feel like I actually see God's like love and his grace so much more than when if I get what I want right now, I'm like, thanks God. Love you. See you later.
Yeah.
And the faith that it builds and the intimacy it builds with our Heavenly Father and our Lord and Savior Jesus. I hope that doesn't sound too bad. I'm just trying to be more like just honest about sometimes where I've been in seasons of my life. And it also makes me feel just so just humbled, but also just like just feel for you so much and just everything you've gone through and so many other women that go through the things that you've been through because the level of shame that you carry when you're going through something like this, especially you said a little bit earlier, you were like, oh, I feel like if I, um, I'm still struggling with the eating disorder, I just feel shameful. And like, that just, that just hurts my heart because I think about how, um, God loves you and doesn't want you to feel that shame. If you're still struggling with something like an eating disorder and trauma, that's not a quick fix. That's not like a get over it, suck it up kind of thing. That is a ongoing process of healing and constant relying on Jesus and allowing him to change our thinking habits or help us show us new ways of trying to live out a healthy lifestyle or a lifestyle. I had a
No, it's
point and I
okay.
lost it.
No, I think it makes a lot of sense, and it ties into what we're talking about. So,
Thank you. I also think it's incredible because I think that that's what I was going to say that you know that when you said that you made a great point and you were like, "Oh, like, sometimes you can feel shame, like, you're still struggling with your eating disorder." I think generally on the surface, just as humans, we already automatically our brains sometimes think like, "Oh, I have to be healed from this. This has to be fixed.
mhm.
And if it's not, I'm embarrassed or I feel shame because I should be or I shouldn't be," or all the things we might think about when it gets rooted back to shame, which is a lot of times also rooted back with trauma. But I think the thing that is so encouraging is that, God says in his word, it's 2 Corinthians 12:9. I know you've heard this scripture where Paul is like begging God to take away the thorn in his side. And God says, my grace is sufficient and my power is made perfect in weakness. And I think we can look at that as like we shouldn't feel shameful if we're still walking in something that we're trying to heal through with trauma or something like as serious as an eating disorder because God's grace is sufficient and he is going to continue to grow you and strengthen you. And it's a process of sanctification and deliverance and just trusting in the Lord. And just because maybe the physical thing is not in that moment healed doesn't mean that God's not working, doesn't mean he's not doing something in your life, and doesn't mean he's not going to strengthen you through this because his grace is absolutely perfect. And so I just hope for you and so many other women if they're that are going through this that you guys don't feel shameful.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, I think that I mean, like, we've mentioned before, shame is such a integral, like, in ingrained part, I feel, of trauma and eating disorders, especially, trauma has, like going through things like that has a funny way of causing your brain to develop these beliefs about yourself that are, like, end up being shameful. Like, part of PTSD, like, criteria is, like, feeling excessive guilt about things. Which that, like, maybe aren't your fault, maybe you are, but, like, overpowering, and we know that in the Lord that we are free of that guilt, but it's a process to kind of give that up and believe that, like, it wasn't your fault, so, yeah. But going back to your saying, like, taking it takes a while to heal, and that's okay. Though, God invites us to bring it to him. Even if we still feel shameful in the moment, like, he still wants us to come to him with it, so
Absolutely. Absolutely. He does. He absolutely does. And you're absolutely right. He wants us to come to him because he will strip away that shame and he will give us hope and comfort. and he's the source of all that is good. So I love what you said. It's so true. So I only have a couple more questions because you've just shared just an incredible amount of your testimony, and it's so encouraging. So
Mhm.
how would you um apply today in your life, like now with everything you're doing and your coaching and all of that stuff? How have you been able to start to apply Jesus in your life today with other people, with how you share Jesus and in your life today, with like how you coach people, and how would you apply Christ in your life today with all the stuff that you do?
Yeah. Okay, that's a good question. Right now, like I mentioned, I'm a therapist, so some of my clients are Christian, and I it's so sweet and cool to be able to integrate faith into therapy because healing is holistic. Like God made our minds, bodies, and souls all like to connect and work together, which is such a beautiful thing. So I think it's so sweet when my clients are have that aspect, like have the Christian background to come to me and we can kind of work through some of that past experiences and healing as like a whole. Because really the only thing that can heal us is the Lord. But then at the same time, it's super special and sweet to have my clients that aren't believers and aren't Christian because it's like an opportunity, I think, to just care and love for my clients well and show them that they are loved and they have so much worth even when like they don't see it. Um and so that's in my work as a therapist, how I am able to kind of minister to my clients. And I always pray for them, like pray that God will give me the words to speak that they need they need to hear during that day. And then I also I coach cross country for high schoolers and track. And it's kind of similar to my therapy where like we don't I don't explicitly like share my faith in because it's like a public school. But of course, if like the kids ask me, I will talk about it, and then just to be able to love them well and show them that they have more worth than just like their times that they run and everything. That's pretty cool. And then I serve in the middle school ministry, so I get to do kind of like the similar things there. And then also, like, when I did work as a nurse, it was cool to be able to support families and just love them well while they're going through either like the best or the hardest days of their lives. So, yes.
Oh, that's amazing. Yeah, and that's amazing. And that's so cool that you that you do cross country, and that you coach it, and just all the ways that you are with such a kind and loving, gentle heart, sharing Jesus through your life and through your trauma, and through everything you've been through, especially something like the things that you've been through. I think people need to hear it. People need to hear Jesus, and they need to hear who Jesus is in like a gentle way, especially when you're dealing with something as serious as that, as the things that you've been through, and the fact that you can just be a light in so many people's lives, and you can share that through your just everything you do, I think is like amazing. And your testimony is incredible, and I can't wait to see more how God continues to use you in the life of others, especially women that have struggled with trauma and eating disorders. To hear your story and to find hope and healing through
Mm,
Jesus, and so it's your testimony is really, really powerful, and the heart that you have behind it as well.
well, thank you. That's really like my hope is that people can feel loved and seen and see Jesus through me. So
Oh,
if people can feel valuable and loved, there we go. That's all.
that's the goal.
So,
That's the goal. It's like we're his hands and feet. And that looks like not just no pun intended, but not that's not just us being like on a podcast. It's like it's how we're living our lives actively every day. Through our jobs, through our ministries, through all the stuff that we're doing. So I just think you just are an awesome woman of God, and just like I said, just the love that you share and the gentleness that you share and how you share Christ is really, really amazing, and also very bold in the setting of therapy, because a lot of people, I imagine that's a very, very hard area to share Jesus if you are trying to counsel people that aren't Christians.
Mm, mhm,
So, um, I want to ask you this is I only have two more questions, but I love this question. And, I say this every time to every girl that comes on, but I love to ask this. And I want to ask you because, like I said, when I first got asked this question, I was like, I like really had to think about it. I was like, oh my gosh, and just sit there and really think why, in order to answer this. So, for those who ask you why that you believe, why do you believe?
mm. Um, so when I was thinking through this question, there's so many things that I could say because I've seen so much evidence of the truth of the gospel. But what I kept coming back to is like, how can I not believe? And um praise the Lord that I can say that. I feel so like thankful that that is my response to that question because and I even remember like when I was literally in 6th grade, like I went to a public school and we were learning about what evolution or how the world became a thing and they don't teach us the gospel, they teach us like and some theories and I was like, "But how do you how does that doesn't make sense?" And I was getting all like, "That doesn't make sense." Like as a 6th grader, like you have like it's the God created the world, Jesus died for our sins. Like how do you not believe this? And I think back to that time like, wow, that was kind of like, I just believed that from such a young age, and I feel so thankful. And then I wasn't always, like, that brave with my faith, like, even growing through grow in high school, I became more, like, fearful to share the gospel, but anyways, when if I ever start to get doubts about the truth of the gospel, in my life, I feel like my soul just cries out to God and has been like, God, remove the doubts from me. And so that gives me more faith and more proof that the gospel is true because I'm just, like, begging the Lord to take the doubts away from me, which I think is really cool, and that also shows, like, more testament to the truth of that. Um, I know it says it somewhere, I don't remember the verse, but, like, every knee will bow, and every tongue confess, and that's what I think about when I, like, start to get doubts, like, in my mind, but then my soul is like, "No, Lord, save me." And then, the other mm see, I could go on about this question forever, but
Go on, go on.
proofs is, like, one that, like, looking back in my life, I'm like, "Praise the Lord that he answered, like, my prayers with, like, all my family members, like, still being alive." Like, that's I know he doesn't have to answer every prayer, but, like, that in itself is a miracle, and then 2 is, like, through my nursing job especially, I've seen patients holding their babies that are, like, no longer alive, like, now are in the arms of, like, Jesus instead of here on earth, and they are praising the Lord for what he's done in their life, and if that isn't a testimony to the truth of the gospel, I don't know what is, because I can't even imagine the pain of going through that. Even if the pain like, just watching that has brought so much pain and sadness to see, and, like, being the mom or the parents of that child, I can't imagine, but they're still praising the Lord anyway. Like, that just proof right there. I don't know, and I could go on for forever about this, so I'll stop with that. But
No, that's an incredible answer. And I was gonna say, like, go on as much as you want because it's like there's so there's so much there's so much proof, there's so much evidence to Jesus and to who he is. And so I love that you shared that. And you're right. If women can go through that and still be praising Jesus, like, wow, wow. Like, and I love that you said that too, because, you seeing your family, the evidence of God working in your family's life, the evidence of what he's doing in your life, the evidence. And, yeah, so that's incredible. Thank you. Your answer was just great. And, really, really encouraging. And so, last question. You ready?
yes.
So you've been through a lot as we've talked about and discussed, and we've said a lot too, like trauma itself, everybody goes through, right? um, and all the things. So my question is, for a woman that might be listening to this podcast episode and she's hearing your testimony and she's hearing everything you're saying and she's going through or has gone through exactly what you have been through, but she doesn't know Jesus, what would you say to her?
Mm. I would first her your story matters and the struggles you've been through matter. Whatever like it counts. Like I know you're probably saying it wasn't bad enough and I'm stupid for feeling like this is a hard thing. But I would just would want her to know that like it it matters and it counts and it's important. And especially to Jesus, um, the pain that you went through is important to him. And anything, all the healing in this life is good. And I pray and hope that you find healing in this life. But only the real hope and real healing comes through Jesus. So I would just encourage you to hold on to that hope. And also, you don't need to wait to be fully healed to come to him. He wants you to bring your hurt and pain to him. He wants you to come broken because he's the one that will fix you. So all of you, and you can bring it to him too. Be like, I don't even know where to start. I've prayed that prayer so many times. Like, God, just like help me even want to get better. Like, so he wants you to bring that stuff to him. So the God that created the whole universe, he literally died for you and knows everything about you and he cares about you. That's pretty awesome and pretty cool. So yeah.
Well, that was great, Tayan. Thank you so much. And that's so true. And I love that you say that too, that even if they don't feel like fully healed, God wants to take that because he does. He wants us to come as we are. He wants us to come broken and messy and not all together. Because he's the only one that makes us whole. He's the only one that truly completes and fulfills and just makes us completely whole in him. And uh what is the word I'm looking for? I lost it again. Oh my gosh. But yeah, he's the only one that can make us completely whole and just healed in him. So
Mm. Yeah.
complete. That's the word I was looking for. He's
And
the only one that can make us feel fully healed and complete. And he wants our broken. He wants our messy. He wants all of it because he's the only one that can just really heal us. So, well, thank you so much for being on the podcast, dear Christian women. Taegan, it was such a blessing to have you on, and your testimony is just unbelievable. And you literally are a walking, talking testimony of the evidence of God's goodness and his faithfulness in your life. And you're an amazing woman of God. So thank you again for being on.
well, thank you. I feel so blessed to have the opportunity to share. So
It's been such a blessing, and I am grateful to be able to have you on. Um, And so I just wanted to encourage any woman listening today to the podcast to Taegan's testimony. And if you've just felt touched by it, write us if you feel like you can relate. Or if you have a testimony that you want to share, please go online and reach out to us at dearchristianwomen.com. Share with us your testimony and about Jesus in through your life. We want to hear it. We want it on the podcast. And anybody that wants to start following along to hear Taegan and so many more amazing testimonies of Jesus, you can find us on all social media platforms, and we are on every streaming platform. So thank you again, ladies, for listening in. This is Colette with Your Christian Women. Have a great night. You did.